What's up, everybody? I'm terrified. I'm Max. I'm coming at you with a crappy webcam, surprisingly good mic, and a yellow duck coffee mug. So let's talk about code, specifically a concept that applies to pretty much any code running anywhere, but for me was especially helpful programming server side. You see, code is all about context. A programming language is just a way to communicate with something. It's context, platform, environment, whatever you want to call it. The thing that is currently running this code in this language. For example, let's look at JavaScript. Boo! You suck!
Get off the stage, you JavaScript pleb.
Actually, JavaScript doesn't seem to have nearly as much hate as it used to. It still mostly runs in the context of a browser. But taking Node as an example, now JavaScript can run in the context of Node. At least that's how I started off picturing it when I first started programming. Really, it's these contexts that are running the JavaScript, which is a big difference because that means that the environment or the context is the one that's following the instructions that are in the JavaScript file. But browsers and Node are totally different. When JavaScript is being run by the browser, it has access to the DOM, or a document object model, and that's divs, spans, HTML stuff, because that is how a browser knows what to display. But if you take the exact same JavaScript that's running just fine in the browser and you put it into Node, Node will be like, "What's going on here?" That's because Node doesn't have a DOM, at least not natively. JavaScript can't give instructions for it because it's just not there. The DOM doesn't exist in the context that is running the JavaScript, even though the code hasn't changed. And you can't interact with something that doesn't exist, just like my girlfriend. Moving on with Node. So now JavaScript is being run not just by a web browser, but by a web server, which might not have a DOM, but it has access to the file system. And with this change, everything changes. Because a script, whether client-side or server-side, meaning a script that is on the front end or the back end, and by that I mean a script on the browser or the server. They get it! Shut up! I was trapped as a child! A script, again, is just a set of instructions for the context that it is being run by. So now JavaScript can be run by a browser or by Node, because Node is a runtime environment for JavaScript. Another way to say it is Node understands the script that is written in JavaScript. Most shared hosting web servers that I've seen don't have Node installed, but servers usually do have a PHP engine installed, and that engine can understand the instructions or script written in PHP. And this PHP engine, or you could call it a runtime environment for PHP, has access to the file system on the web server the same as Node does for JavaScript. A side note is web servers have other parts that they offer to the context or code engines that are running on them. For instance, they can handle and respond to HTTP requests, because they're a web server like the internet, which gives the code being run by that engine access to the HTTP requests as well, whether that's on Node or PHP. And yes, that's contexts. Inside contexts, running code. But I like talking about the file system, because with access to the file system, your scripts can create more scripts, and not just more PHP scripts. For instance, you can write HTML, CSS, and JavaScript all from within a PHP script, because they're just text. All languages are just text. When a code engine tries to run some text, that's what makes that text valuable. The ability to create new files in other languages from your script is insane. That's like speaking Japanese in English. Again, for example, WordPress is written in PHP. It is a server-side framework. When you install WordPress from the install page, fill out all the information, PHP changes the example config file. It's the same example config file that you can change for a manual code install. PHP just changes the text inside with the text that you put in into the install screen on the WordPress install page. And that's an install page that was written in HTML, but PHP is the one that returned it in the first place. Then it saves the config file under the new file name just like you would do, and this is the final WordPress config file. My point is, it's not magic as much as it seemed like it while you're doing the install. Look, I'm not saying it's simple, WordPress is huge. But when you look at the root directory of a WordPress installation, you find an index file written in PHP. But because the server knows to run PHP files through its PHP engine, instead of just giving the file back, like it would with an index HTML file, it follows the instructions inside of the PHP script, the same way a browser follows JavaScript instructions. The difference is the server waits until a browser navigation or AJAX request asks for that file, whereas the browser with JavaScript just jumps right in as soon as it's loaded. WordPress is just a bunch of PHP files that are put together to build out an admin dashboard or a web page. It's just a set of instructions for the web server to follow with dynamic data. That's why WordPress caching the web page before somebody asks for it speeds things up, because it doesn't have to run the PHP instructions first. It already knows what it's going to return to the browser. But remember, the code doesn't have to return anything. You could just make a server script that adds the number 5 to the number 2 and saves it under a file, but doesn't return a web page or JSON or any kind of data. It's not very useful making a script like that, unless you really like the number 7, but you can do it. And all of this has had such a huge impact on my view of programming and the way that I program, both client-side and server-side. To see the interaction of both sides of the web, that both of them are just following scripts, client or server-side, they're actually kind of the same. So, in summary, All code is just instructions for the context that is running it. And a server-side script is a set of instructions for the web server, with the script language getting access to the web server in different systems that the web server makes available. You can put those instructions inside of a file, and when someone asks for that file from the server, for instance, if someone navigates to it with a browser or submits a form to it or gives it an AJAX request, then the server will do whatever is in those instructions, whether or not those instructions have anything to do with the thing that's actually asking for the file in the first place. I'm okay. So hopefully this was helpful. If not, then hopefully watching me not be helpful was at least a little entertaining. If there's something you'd like to hear me explain, definitely let me know. Thanks for watching. Stay frosty. SmackJax is out.